Nature doesn't wait. It strikes without warning and doesn't care who's watching. Today, we're going to take a look at 75 of the most jaw-dropping disasters you wouldn't believe if they were not caught on camera. But first, here's the most insane one of them all. It started off like just another tremor. Nothing new for Japan. But this one didn't fade. It grew. Then, everything snapped. On March 11th, 2011, a 9.1 magnitude quake hit off the coast of Tohoku. And what followed was beyond imagining. A wall of water, taller than buildings, charged inland. Towns disappeared in minutes. Cars, homes, entire neighborhoods were gone, like they were never there. And as massive as that was, it wasn't the first time the sea turned savage. Back in 2004, the ocean played a cruel trick. First, it pulled back, exposing the seabed. Tourists stood there, phones out, curious. Then came the roar, a towering tsunami, triggered by a 9.1 earthquake deep beneath the Indian Ocean, slammed into the shores of 14 countries. What was paradise one moment turned into chaos the next. But not all destruction comes with waves. Sometimes it rises from the ground. After weeks of subtle warnings, Mount St. Helens in Washington state finally blew. The explosion was so violent it flattened forests and turned daylight to dusk. A blast of ash, fire, and raw energy. Nothing could stop it. The mountain had been holding back, and when it let go, it didn't hold anything back. While this disaster came with an explosion, some others burned slowly, like a fever you can't shake. Just like when the Amazon rainforest caught fire, and this time, it wasn't a spark here or there. It was an inferno. From above, it looked like veins of flame tearing through green. Smoke blackened the sky, and the lungs of the earth gasped for air. For weeks, the fires ate through one of the most vital ecosystems on the planet. Well, fire spreads, but earthquakes strike fast. Haiti was hit by a 7.0 quake that flattened its capital in under a minute. There was no warning, just a violent jolt, and then silence. The aftermath dust filled the air. Streets disappeared under rubble, and in the middle of it all, people searched for loved ones with their bare hands. That kind of destruction leaves scars on humanity that don't heal. But sometimes, they get torn open again, by wind. In 2017, Hurricane Maria struck Puerto Rico with 175-mile-per-hour winds that ripped the island to shreds. Power went out and didn't return for months. Water was scarce. Help was slow. And all around, roofs were gone. Trees snapped in half, and lives left in limbo. But what if you didn't even have days to prepare? What if the warning was only a few minutes? That's what happened in Joplin, Missouri, in 2011. An EF5 tornado touched down and turned an entire city into splinters. It sounded like a freight train from hell, and when it passed, it left nothing standing in its path. People crawled out of basements into a world they barely recognized. But thousands of miles away, in the quiet hours of the night, another disaster struck. In 1999, Turkey's Izmit region was rocked by a 7.4 earthquake just after midnight. Buildings crumbled before people could even get out of bed. Power lines snapped, roads cracked, and as the dust settled, the full scale of the devastation came into view. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. And yet, nature still had more in store. When Typhoon Haiyan slammed into the Philippines, it wasn't just a storm. It was a monster. Winds hit 195 miles per hour, strong enough to rip trees from the ground and toss cars like toys. Coastal towns were swallowed whole by the storm surge. Nothing was safe. Not concrete buildings, not steel, and definitely not people. But this storm isn't the only disaster that has affected the Philippines. Mount Pinatubo erupted in the Philippines after centuries of silence. Ash clouds turned day into night. Entire villages vanished under the weight of falling debris. And the eruption was so massive, it actually cooled global temperatures for years. One mountain, one eruption, felt by the whole planet. It started slow, barely noticeable. But within seconds, the ground beneath Nepal was violently shaking. On April 25, 2015, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit, and ancient temples that had stood for centuries crumbled like sandcastles. Streets split, homes vanished, In moments, Kathmandu was a city frozen in dust, panic, and silence. And just a few years earlier, something similar had unfolded in China. It was 2:28 p.m. when everything went wrong in Wenchuan County. A 7.9 quake struck, ripping through schools, homes, and office buildings. Rescue teams poured in, trying to beat time, but in so many places, it was already too late. And in just 1 year later, in 2009, Indonesia's Sumatra Island was hit by a 7.6 earthquake. It only lasted a few moments, but that's all it took. Roads cracked like glass, homes folded in on themselves. From the sky, cities looked like they'd been crushed under a giant's hand. But not all disasters strike in sudden bursts. Some creep in slowly and don't leave for weeks. In 2003, Europe suffered under a brutal heat wave. Temperatures rose past 100 degrees. And the heat didn't just break records. It broke people. Thousands died. Rivers shrank, crops failed, and cities felt like ovens that never turned off. Then, in 2017, while Puerto Rico was still healing from Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Irma was tearing through the Caribbean. It didn't just hit, it erased everything. Entire islands were flattened, as if the land itself had been scraped clean. Wind, rain, storm surge. It all came together in one massive, swirling catastrophe. And before the world could even catch its breath, Sulawesi, Indonesia, was hit with a 1-2 punch. First, a violent earthquake rocked the island. Minutes later, the sea came roaring in. It was 2018, and the tsunami that followed swept away buildings, cars, and families. Survivors ran uphill with only seconds to spare. But sometimes, destruction doesn't come crashing down, it hangs in the air. Over a decade ago, Iceland's Eyjafjallajökull volcano erupted with no warning. Ash poured into the skies, grounding flights across Europe. For weeks, the sky was filled with smoke and dust. It was a reminder that even from far away, nature can shut the world down. What made the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami even more haunting was its return. As survivors tried to rebuild, another wave came. Smaller, but crueler. The sea that had already taken so much came back to wipe away what little remained. It was salt in a wound that hadn't even started healing. And get this, both happened the same year. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, fire was on the move again. In 2007, California wildfires tore across hills and neighborhoods like they had a grudge. They moved fast, too fast. Homes were gone in minutes. People fled with whatever they could carry, not knowing if they'd ever see their homes again. Just when the world thought the worst might be behind it, another catastrophe rolled in. This time from the Pacific. In January 2022, an underwater volcano near Tonga erupted with a force so massive, it was heard across the globe. Literally. The Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai eruption launched ash 36 miles into the sky and triggered a tsunami that raced across the Pacific, reaching as far as Japan, the Americas, and New Zealand. For Tonga, the skies darkened, communications went down, and the island disappeared beneath a storm of ash and waves. And as if the Pacific didn't already prove it has a temper, 2016 brought another monster, this time aimed right at Taiwan. Typhoon Meranti showed up like a wrecking ball with no brakes. Wind speeds hit over 190 miles per hour, fast enough to launch trucks. Trees snapped like matchsticks, windows shattered, and buildings lost entire walls. By the time it passed, cities looked like they'd been torn up by a giant blender. But you don't always need wind or waves to destroy a city. Sometimes the ground just decides to give out. That's what happened in Tangshan, China. It was just after 3 a.m. when a 7.5 magnitude quake hit, catching almost everyone in their sleep. Whole neighborhoods collapsed before people even had a chance to move. In seconds, an entire city was flattened. Fast forward to 2019, and disaster took on a different form in Mozambique. Cyclone Idai didn't just hit and move on. It camped out. Rain poured, rivers flooded, and towns disappeared under mud and water. People climbed onto rooftops and waited, hoping someone would come. Some waited for days. Oh, this wasn't just a storm, it was a full-blown survival test. And while that storm dragged on, other disasters hit swiftly like a sucker punch. Guatemala's Volcán de Fuego erupted so fast, people barely had time to blink. Lava didn't ooze, it charged. Ash clouds tore downhill and swallowed everything. Villages at the base had no warning, and in minutes, everything was gone. In 2019, tourists were standing on White Island in New Zealand when the volcano exploded right under their feet. 1 second they were snapping selfies, the next they were running for their lives. But even at that, not all disasters are fast. Some take their time and still ruin everything. In 1993, the Mississippi River flooded so badly it stuck around for months. Rain kept coming, dams broke, and towns slowly drowned. People had to boat through neighborhoods just to check their mail. It was like living in a waterlogged nightmare that wouldn't end. And across the ocean, Germany found out that even regular rain can be deadly if there's enough of it. What started as a rainy week turned into one of the worst floods in the country's history. Rivers overflowed, homes were swept away, and streets turned into fast-moving rivers. People barely had time to grab anything before it all disappeared. Water alone is one thing, but when water and mountains team up, things get really dangerous. An example was when Colombia's Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted and melted the glacier sitting on top of it. That turned into a mudslide so massive, it buried the town of Armero under 20 feet of sludge. It happened overnight, while people were sleeping. By morning, the town was just gone. And speaking of fast-moving hell, nothing scorched the earth quite like California's Camp Fire in 2018. One spark and the whole town of Paradise went up in flames. People jumped in their cars and drove through fire just to escape. It looked like a scene from the apocalypse. Only this one was real. Then, there's nature's quieter weapon: ice. In 2014, a massive piece of glacier broke off in Alaska and smashed into a lake. What happened next? A wave that could flip boats and chill your spine. Campers nearby ran for their lives as water rushed toward the shore like something out of a movie. It was silent, then boom. Chaos. And while that wave in Alaska was cold and quick, what hit Brazil was slow, wet, and absolutely relentless. In the state of Pernambuco, days of non-stop rain triggered deadly landslides and floods. Entire hillsides gave way, sending rivers of mud crashing through homes. Streets turned into brown rivers, and people were literally wading through waist-deep water in their own neighborhoods. In 2010, Mount Merapi erupted, and it didn't just blow once. It kept going, over and over for weeks. Lava flows, ash plumes, pyroclastic clouds. It was like the mountain was emptying everything it had. People were forced to run over and over, never knowing when the next blast would come. And sometimes, it's not about fire or water. It's about speed. A mudslide slammed through the tiny town of Oso, Washington in 2014. One moment, it was a normal morning. The next, a wall of dirt and debris ripped through the town, swallowing homes in seconds. It moved so fast, no one had time to react. This is regarded as one of the deadliest landslides in U.S. history. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, the skies were falling in India. In 2013, extreme monsoon rains hit Uttarakhand, and when the ground couldn't take it anymore, it gave out. Floods tore through villages, landslides crushed roads, and entire buildings got swept away like toy blocks. People were stranded for days, with no way out, but by helicopter. And if that wasn't enough, let's talk about heat. Not the kind you complain about in traffic. The kind that kills. In 2021, a brutal heat wave hit the Pacific Northwest. We're talking record-breaking temperatures in a place known for cool, cloudy days. Roads buckled, power grids fried, and hundreds of people, especially the elderly, couldn't survive the heat. In 2015, Southeast Asia was blanketed by toxic haze from illegal forest fires in Indonesia. Smoke covered entire countries. Schools closed, airports shut down, and millions of people were stuck breathing in thick, choking air for weeks. And just like smoke hangs in the air, sometimes destruction comes from above, like in 2013, when a meteor exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia. No warning, nothing, just a bright flash and a sonic boom that shattered thousands of windows. It wasn't even that big, but the shockwave injured over 1,500 people, all from a rock that came out of nowhere. And then there was 2021 in Germany and Belgium. A flood that felt more like a tidal wave. Rivers swelled overnight after extreme rainfall, catching everyone off guard. Streets disappeared. Basements filled in minutes. Cars floated down highways like pool toys. It was one of Europe's worst disasters in years. But back in Asia, Mother Nature wasn't done. Typhoon Doksuri slammed into the Philippines and southern China with winds pushing 130 miles per hour. But the real damage came from the rain. Cities were overwhelmed. Landslides crashed down. Rivers broke their banks. And thousands had to evacuate in the middle of the night. And if you ever thought deserts were safe from floods, think again. In 2024, Dubai saw its worst rainfall in 75 years. What started as light showers turned into full-on street rivers. Luxury malls, highways, even airports were underwater. People were kayaking through parking lots. Yeah, kayaking in Dubai. Something similar was what happened in 2021. A massive landslide in Indonesia buried entire villages under tons of earth and rock. What started as a minor rainfall escalated into one of the deadliest landslides in the region. Now, let's talk about the wildfires of 2020 in California. For weeks, flames raged through the state, burning over 4 million acres of land. The fire was so intense, it created its own weather system. Yeah, you heard me right. Weather, created by fire. Talk about a fiery apocalypse. Ah, yes. Flash floods in 2020, Texas. A rainstorm that felt like it would never end, pouring down for hours, flooded entire cities. What was once a dry street turned into a river in minutes. It's like Mother Nature just hit the fast-forward button on the flood machine. Meanwhile, over in Australia in 2020, wildfires burned so hot and so wide, they literally created their own thunderstorms. I'm not kidding, firestorms. Lightning, fire, smoke, all mashed together into a nightmare sky. In 2023, Turkey and Syria were rocked by a pair of devastating earthquakes within hours of each other. Buildings pancaked. Entire neighborhoods crumbled like they were made of cardboard. The aftershocks just kept coming, and rescue teams worked around the clock trying to pull survivors from the wreckage. But sometimes, destruction comes not from the ground, but from deep, deep below the sea. In 2007, a massive undersea earthquake off the Solomon Islands triggered a tsunami that swallowed entire coastal villages. There was barely any time to react. 1 minute it was quiet, the next, walls of water were rolling in, carrying away everything not bolted down. And speaking of fast disasters, Sierra Leone suffered one of the deadliest mudslides in history. After days of heavy rain, a hillside collapsed, sending a wall of mud into the capital city of Freetown. Entire communities were buried alive in seconds, with almost no warning. But even when you can see it coming, it doesn't mean you can stop it. Like when Hurricane Dorian just parked itself over the Bahamas. It didn't pass through, it stayed, pounding the islands with 185-mile-per-hour winds for almost 2 days. Floodwaters swallowed homes, and survivors said it felt like the storm would never end. And if hurricanes seem brutal, try living through a volcanic eruption that freezes a whole town in time. In 1973, Iceland's Eldfell volcano erupted right next to a fishing town. Lava literally rolled down the streets. People scrambled to save what they could, even spraying seawater to try and slow the lava. It worked, a little, but parts of the town were buried forever under solid rock. And sometimes, it's not fire or floods. It's pure, unfiltered cold. Canada was hammered by an ice storm so bad it snapped power lines like twigs. Ice coated everything. Trees collapsed. Roads disappeared under inches of slippery ice. Millions were without power for weeks, basically living in real-life frozen wastelands. Meanwhile, back where it was supposed to be hot. In 2010, Pakistan got hit with monsoon rains that refused to quit. The Indus River flooded so badly, it submerged a fifth of the entire country. Crops were wiped out and millions were forced to leave, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. But that wasn't the only place drowning. Myanmar faced its own catastrophic floods after relentless monsoon rains. Villages turned into lakes, farms were wiped clean. And the roads? Yeah, those became new rivers, too. And when it's not water or fire, it's just raw, uncontrollable earth. When Indonesia's Anak Krakatoa volcano partially collapsed into the ocean and triggered a tsunami, it came without any warning signs. No earthquakes, no sirens, just sudden, deadly waves slamming into beaches crowded with tourists and locals. By the time people realized what was happening, it was too late. And it wasn't the only time a volcano decided to cause chaos without a heads-up. Mount Nyiragongo in the Democratic Republic of Congo erupted with almost no warning, sending rivers of lava tearing through neighborhoods. Thousands had to run. literally run for their lives as the ground split open and fire poured through the streets. Meanwhile, just a year before, storms were busy doing their own thing. Cyclone Amphan became one of the most powerful storms to hit India and Bangladesh in decades. Winds destroyed homes like paper, salt water flooded fields, and villages vanished under walls of water. And just to make things worse, COVID was already stretching resources to the breaking point. Oh, but if you thought typhoons were bad, Turkey was rocked by a devastating earthquake that left the country in shock. The 7.0 magnitude earthquake killed over 100 people, collapsed buildings, and left thousands homeless. The aftershocks kept people on edge, unsure when the next one would hit. In 2022, record-breaking floods hit South Africa, swallowing roads, homes, and entire communities. Hillsides collapsed, highways washed away. It wasn't just rain. It was like the land itself gave up and let the water have everything. And even frozen mountains aren't safe. Just while they were healing from what happened in 2013, a glacier broke apart in India's Uttarakhand region and sent a roaring avalanche of water, ice, and rock down the valley. It slammed into dams, power stations, and villages and wiped them out in seconds. It looked like a scene from a disaster movie, but it was horrifyingly real. But sometimes, it's the sky that turns on you. Like when massive hailstorms hit Mexico. We're talking car-sized chunks of ice raining from the sky. Streets were buried under feet of frozen slush, like winter had crash-landed in the middle of summer. And while hail can smash your car, mud can bury your entire town. In 2023, heavy rains in Brazil's São Paulo region triggered catastrophic mudslides. Hillsides turned into rivers of sludge, swallowing homes, cars, and anything unlucky enough to be in the way. Meanwhile, Australia decided to throw in a flood just for good measure. In 2022, Eastern Australia saw rainfall levels that broke every record, and then some. Rivers swallowed towns, roads disappeared, and people had to evacuate by boat, or, in some cases, by jet ski. And, speaking of places that shouldn't flood, Death Valley, one of the driest places on Earth, got hit with freak rainstorms that turned it into a muddy, raging lake. Tourists were trapped, roads were washed away, and the desert basically said, plot twist. Meanwhile, in other places, a brutal winter storm froze Texas solid. Pipes burst, power grids collapsed, homes turned into refrigerators. It wasn't just cold, it was survival mode for millions. But enough about cold. Let's talk about fire again. In 2021, Greece was hit by wildfires so intense they turned entire coastlines into smoke-choked nightmares. Ancient olive groves, homes, and villages were wiped off the map. The sky turned blood red. People fled to the beaches, literally running from the flames. In 2018, a sudden landslide in Laos wiped out an entire dam project, releasing a massive flood that buried villages downstream. Thousands were displaced overnight, and rescue efforts had to fight through mud and debris just to reach survivors. And across the ocean, yet another storm was brewing. Typhoon Goni smashed into the Philippines as one of the strongest landfalls ever recorded. Roofs peeled off. Whole towns were flattened. And once again, people had to rebuild from the ground up, starting with nothing. In 2020, devastating floods hit Sudan, submerging entire regions underwater. Historic pyramids and archaeological sites were surrounded by lakes where dry desert should have been. It was history drowning in real time. And sometimes, the disasters don't stop. They pile on. For instance, Japan was hit by historic flooding, and then a deadly heat wave, like back-to-back. First, towns underwater. Then, record-smashing temperatures cooking everything left standing. And if you think that sounds unfair, Madagascar got hammered by not one, but 4 tropical storms in a row. Floods, landslides, winds, over and over again, like nature just refused to give the island a break. Meanwhile, earthquakes kept sneaking up on people. Croatia got hit by a strong quake right in the middle of COVID lockdowns. People fled their shaking homes into streets that were supposed to be empty. Buildings cracked, statues fell, and centuries-old architecture crumbled. And halfway across the world, California was once again feeling the burn. In 2021, the Dixie Fire became one of the largest wildfires in California history. It didn't just burn trees, it ate entire towns, leaving behind smoking wastelands where homes once stood. But sometimes, the danger doesn't even come from land or sea. In 2018, Hawaii's Kilauea volcano erupted, and kept erupting for months. Rivers of lava flowed through neighborhoods. Entire subdivisions disappeared, and the ground literally cracked open under people's feet. And when you think you've seen it all. In 2022, Pakistan's historic floods submerged a third of the entire country. A third. Crops wiped out. Livestock drowned. Homes gone. It was one of the worst humanitarian disasters of the decade. And back up north. In 2023, Canada saw one of its worst wildfire seasons ever recorded. Smoke drifted across entire provinces, even reaching cities like New York and Washington, D.C., where the skies turned orange and the air tasted like campfire. Finally, let's end with something out of this world. Literally. In 2024, a solar storm slammed into Earth's magnetic field, causing massive auroras and near misses for satellite and power grid failures. Scientists called it a cosmic bullet we barely dodged. And if a bigger one ever hits, well, nature might just hit the reset button for all of us. And that's a wrap on some of the craziest natural disasters ever caught on camera. Nature doesn't play favorites. When it strikes hard. If you thought these were unbelievable, just wait. There's more where that came from. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more insane moments, and drop a comment on which one shocked you the most. Stay safe, stay ready, and we'll catch you in the next one.